You're listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zinno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. As always, we appreciate you joining us each and every week. Before we get to this week's guest, who is right here in the state of Georgia with me, who has gone on to do some amazing things inside the veteran community, particularly combating veteran suicide. To get to him in just a moment. First, a few announcements that we give you as normal every single week. Please follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Hazard Ground Podcast. Continue to leave Apple reviews as well. Help grow the show. We are getting bigger and bigger, and the only way we do it is by you guys leaving 5-star reviews, continuing to help everybody know why you love the show and why you should listen each and every week. So thank you for those in advance. Don't forget about our promotion with Amazon. You can go to our website, hazardground.com. Click on the Amazon button at the bottom of the homepage or under the sponsors tab, and you'll get redirected to Amazon. You can do all your normal Amazon shopping. We get a percentage of what you guys spend, and then we donate that percentage back to some of the great charities and organizations you've heard featured here on the show. Also works really easy from your smartphone. Easy and convenient, redirects you right to the app. So if you save your credit card information, everything, it's convenient and easy to use. So again, check out hazardground.com first before you do your Amazon shopping. All right, this week's guest, former Army captain who was also a Ranger, spent a total of 10 years between the active duty and the Guard in total of service, has a deployment to Iraq and Afghanistan. Post-career, got his law degree from Emory University, works in commercial real estate. Also now has established a nonprofit called Something Outta Nothing, a project of the nonprofit Toughest Kids to help raise support and also create awareness about veterans' suicide. He is Earl Porter joining us here on the Hazard Ground Podcast. Earl, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thank you, Mark. Long time fan from your radio time. I picked up listening to the Braves, my last duty station, and was acquainted. You were kind of the first veteran transitionee that I knew in my periphery.
It's good to have another fellow Georgian here with us, and you are a product of the University of North Georgia. And while I joke and say it's a cult, that there have been many an officer that I have served with and beyond that have gone on to do amazing things that graduated from North Georgia in the Corps of Cadets there. In fact, now Colonel Dan Kearney from Restrepo, back when he was Captain Kearney, came from North Georgia. So a long lineage. You know, you're upholding the greatness of North Georgia.
Hey, I love North Georgia. It gave me a clean canvas after high school. I've got my entire paradigm of understanding of leadership from that institution, and diamond in the rough.
Also, we have a mutual friend, Susan, who also interviewed you for the Library of Congress. We've had a couple of people who she has referred to the show. She's a great veterans advocate, a wonderful storyteller. And for those who don't know, the Library of Congress has like this whole veteran stories deal, kind of similar to what we're doing here with the Hazard Ground. But, you know, they like to tell veteran stories as well inside the Library of Congress. So you've shared your story there as well. But, I mean, I know North Georgia was where you got your start, but you mentioned a clean slate. So was there trouble prior to getting to North Georgia for you?
I'd say hardship. Yeah, so I grew up in Decatur, Georgia. I say I'm a product of the community. I left home at 14 and took an unbeaten path and tried to emancipate myself. There wasn't any jurisprudence for that. Now I know the fancy word. And so it took the discretion of a judge, Judge Nash, and Dorothy Murphy, a public defender, just her vicious advocacy of my rights as a kid that allowed me to go to a private children's home instead of a public children's home, and then eventually to have guardianship granted to my sister. So there's some jumping around through defects of different high schools there. I ended up coming back to the city of Decatur because I had roots there, Boy Scouts, wrestling, JROTC, and kind of fought to get a scholarship because when you live out of district, you can't go but for that tuition. And they let me kind of graduate with my class, and that was a clean slate for me to kind of have transition. I had a loss of my father that summer. He's also a Vietnam vet. And because of my upbringing, I didn't get to know him until I left the house. And so I got 3 years with him. And he went from absolutely resentful of the military. And he was a black dude going to Vietnam under conscription, coming back to East Atlanta, not being liked for being going to Vietnam or being a black guy. So he had a lot of resentment to me receiving a 4-year Army ROTC scholarship. And I really felt that father's love in that instance and his support. And when I went to North Georgia, I remember First Sergeant Dean Papka, old burly Merrill Marauders type Ranger mind, and these big bear claws say Earl Porter toe the line. And that was the first time I didn't ask to go by my nickname of Chico. One, because I was scared shitless, First Sergeant Dean Papka, and two, I felt invigorated to carry my dad's name. And so North Georgia was the first meritocracy I got to go to, if you will, where like your merit gives you chances to skip PT because you have a good GPA, or go to airborne school because you did great, or whatever. I was fueled by that incentive in a construct where it was kind of fairness, whether you're white, blue, green, whatever. Here you are a cadet and you work with your peers to make a team. And all the different cavities of leadership at North Georgia are just endless. And it was really inspiration of 2 aviators / Rangers in high school when I was in JROTC, plus the infantry-minded leadership of North Georgia that I think gave me a really good framework to enter as a lieutenant. And
now, you had mentioned you were a diamond in the rough there, but you got to go to. I mean, did you end up going to airborne school, or did you mention that was the case?
I did.
Okay.
I got to go to airborne school while I was there. I got to go to Russia on a Homestead scholarship. I got to go to Mountain Warfare School up in Jericho, Vermont, probably the coolest, most professional school I've ever been to, their winter phase. And then I even got the Shadow Ranger School for 3 days. What a bad idea. But I had reached this accolade of #1 in the nation. So that blank canvas, all that resentment for a tough childhood got to fuel a lot of effort with a construct of where to put it. And I got #1 in the nation. I hadn't won a foot race. I hadn't won a wrestling tournament before that. I hadn't, I was like the 10th guy on varsity on everything I played. And they kind of balance your GPA against your service, your physical performance. And that was the first cadet to do that for North Georgia. So I felt like I paid back an investment that Decatur put into me to go up there on a scholarship.
Did you have any idea what you wanted to do in the Army while you were at North Georgia?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to be an aviator. I wanted to fly helicopters. It started actually. I got a funny story. We'll get to it. When I was listening to Alex Mack talk to you on your podcast, doing my research, and I'll get to that later. But I joined literally to fly. I'm a product of Colonel Baker. He was a Huey pilot and Ranger Tab, and Colonel Stewart, same thing, but had some Delta Force in there too, some of the original guys. And I had this mindset that I could do that until I found out you couldn't do both. And so I really wanted to do aviation, but everything I did at North Georgia was infantry. There's this unit called Mountain Order Colombo, which literally started by a cadet in '62 approaching the RIs at Frank B. Merrill and saying, hey, we want to learn, and basically taking it in the face, and learning mountaineering and patrolling from a guy named Louis P. Colombo, who had surveyed, Antarctica for the Army and done all this stuff. And it was CTLT, or Cadet Troop Leaders Training or something. I went to at Fort Bragg, and for aviation, had a blast. Utility maximum. We got I say I got to fly a helicopter to let me hold the joystick, right? And the little controller, and, I got to do the medevac training, and it was just a blast. And then I met up with a guy named Cody Gallo that I went to Decatur High School with, who just returned from Afghanistan. And he was like a senior on the wrestling team when I was a freshman. I just wanted to, North Georgia ingrains into you, make use of every opportunity. So I wanted to meet with him and learn what that means to be an infantry platoon leader in Afghanistan. And met with him. He didn't have time. he had to go to a meeting. He told me to sit in the back with Joe. It was like Mexican Joe, Black Joe, White Joe, like all sitting around 4 hours cleaning weapons, and I smelled family. And so in that instance, I switched from wanting to be aviator to choosing infantry. And because I did well in the OML, it wasn't really a problem. And honestly, one of the best decisions I ever made. There was no data for it, but intuitively, I can see in hindsight, I had a familial void, and the infantry is literally a family. And so it made so much sense at the time, and I've never looked back since.
All right, so you end up commissioning, and it's 2009, correct, when you commission?
Yeah, commissioned 2009, right out the gate, go to Georgia Tech to be a Gold Star recruiter.
Ah, there you go, right?
Yeah.
And then obviously you head off to it used to be called IOBC, but now it's Infantry BOLC, right? I mean,
right. We're at BOLC 2 back then, so you had to do BOLC 2 first.
What's
and
BOLC 2?
I was like this.
Why do I not know this?
We joked about it as a Jessica Lynch project. It was effectively the reaction to not getting certain training at your particular BOLC. So they made everyone, they were kind of looking, I think, at the Marine Corps and seeing TBS model and saying, hey, we'll have a 12-week course, BOLC 2, every officer goes to it, and then you go off to IBOLC and ABOLC and all these other things. So I was like the second to last class. The funding was done. No, everyone knew, this project is not going anywhere. Ironically, it was better resourced than IOBC. But of course, when I got to IOBC, the training was completely different. And I had this Marine crossover as my platoon trainer. So we got a good old grunt style IOBC experience. Back when you can punch each other in the face and stick IVs in you, and it was good,
Yeah, those were the good old days. We long for harder times, I guess. Nonetheless,
Yeah.
After you end up and you finish your OBC, what do you call Basic Officers Leaders Course, BOLC, you end up going to where? What's your first duty station?
Let's see. Did Ranger and went straight to Stewart.
Okay, so you did Ranger School first?
Yeah, did Ranger School first after like mechanized BOLC or whatever, little 3-week course. I was Winter Ranger. Had a foot injury at the end of IOBC. IOBC for me was really humbling. I went from number 1 in the nation to peered number 7 in my squad of like 12 and like West Pointers. And I was just like, we had this West Point platoon. I was right in that heat. And they were called Dude Cav. I don't know if you ever heard of them. They got in trouble for like, I'm sure they don't want to talk about it, but got in trouble for going to sororities around and partying on representation as Dude Cav. That was so humbling because I'm in the squad with like Stephen Petraeus, Little Petraeus, and like all these the whole West Point football team. And they were all good people. And it allowed me to kind of reset my clock and look at just becoming malleable again. So I go to Ranger School 2 months after my peers because I'd hurt my foot. Ended up going straight through, graduating in the wintertime, and by June, landing. So
you didn't get recycled?
Stewart.
You had the foot injury, you didn't get recycled. Wow.
Holy shit, was it close. Oh, it was close as hell. Every time it was close. Actually, when history repeats itself. I told you how I went to Ranger School for 3 days as a cadet, and it was like a horrible idea. I had a run-in at 4:00 in the morning as a cadet where company commander did not like the call that cadets are walking with Ranger School, and he let me know. And all the RIs are just, like, hey, man, just take it. And he was just one of those honorary cats. Well, I leave, go on about life, come back. I'm now the chow rep because my Ranger buddy is like the NCO of the class or whatever. And he made me the chow rep. So I'm the a-hole that has to, tell you to get up every 2 minutes. But I get the privilege of like passing out pancake duty or whatever on the cleanup crew. And the same guy walks by me and he goes, hey, do I know you, Ranger? And I'm like, no. And he literally went in. He didn't like North Georgia cadets. He still didn't like me. And now he's the S3. And next thing I know, one of my Hawaiian platoon tags came over or whatever and got me on the bus while everyone's over there getting their boxes. And he was, I don't know what you did to piss this man off, but he's trying to day one you. And I was just fortunate to sit there on my bus and go straight to Florida with everybody else. So it got close, man. I got hypothermic in winters. Should have been medical recycled probably, but didn't. Just had great Ranger buddies. Sergeant Penny, gentleman that's passed since, was a Ranger bat medic, and just taking care of me and helping me get through those horrible moments. I'm the type of guy that would get everyone else's.
What was the toughest part of Ranger School for you?
Having seen behind the curtain and walked the North Georgia mountains back and forth for this Colombo thing I was in, or North Georgia, just generally FTX is out there, and Boy Scouts. Growing up, we always walked around. I know, I know they are not insensitively cooking steaks a mile, upwind from you. You know what I mean? And like, I got to see, and like, I could tie some of those knots faster than the people, and like, it was so hyped in my head versus what I experienced, and it was brutally just cold that I had to learn how to give 125% regardless. And that was the toughest part of me. It wasn't the sleep, because I told you I left home at 14. I had a life with different structure. I was pulling 2 all-nighters a week in college because I didn't learn how to read till college. And it wasn't the food, because I did wrestling. But it was that gray area of like still giving a shit when you don't give a shit. And that came and paid off dividends over and over. And you learn principles like never steal another person's Ranger school or whatever. And that community is just so thick. And I'm sure you know.
Why did you not learn to read till college? That's something you sort of glossed over very quickly.
Oh man. Literally I had read a book like Goosebumps and stuff, or, required reading in public school if I, had to skim it or something like that. But I just thought I was like just not allergic to reading, man. Honestly, like at some point I would fall asleep so quickly. Now fast forward 2012, I returned from Afghanistan. I'm able to cut the line for LASIK, and when I'm getting analyzed for ear, nose, and throat stuff, or not that, but I'm doing both at the same time. They noticed that my eyes did something weird, that walking around, I see 20, 25 like everyone else, but my eyes were in hyperdrive. And so when I go to read, when everyone else kind of up levels in concentration, I'm already in overdrive, and my brain just kind of gets exhausted very quickly. So I didn't know that at the time, and I didn't really see anybody reading in my upbringing in that regard, like that made it make sense. But then I remember one of the first books that really caught my attention, meaning I read it 3 times back to back, was Black Hawk Down. And that was kind of, I'm of that. 9th grade was my 9/11. And my upbringing was not pro-military at all. But I found a lot of add value in my life in the ROTC world that cut through some of that noise when you're on the football field, or you needed to have a parent on the sideline to kind of help. ROTC kind of gave me that individual autonomy in a collective team sport feel, and which made it leverageable, later on. So when the military said it was good to read, like my approach to a 4.0 is because there was a fat dude that had a 4.0. And he got to skip PT. He was a specialist in North Georgia. I was like, what the hell? What's that about? And they were like, hey, he's got 4.0. You can skip PT Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I was like, all right, yeah, let's get it. And then my approach to learning just changed. I had to figure out I was a tactile learner, memory cards, like write it all down and build it and whatever. Getting that LASIK, fast forward 2012, changed. And it became ascertainable to go to law school. I started doing bigger and more structured tasks in the military. We had got the order to integrate women when I was at IOVC, and I had to help take the course from 17 weeks to 19 weeks, and that meant I went from like platoon leader for 6 years, able to manage 42 variables, and I'm composed because that's when my ADHD is flawless. Right. To I've got to read 800 pages and figure out how to build this course program of instruction or whatever as an act in S3. And if I didn't have that little physical, surgery or whatnot, I don't see that happening. Wow. And just so many ways it intertwined, man. But now approaching law school was kind of the time I chose to learn. So like undergrad was learning how to learn, and law school I got to pick the most 2/3 of the courses I took, and just liberating, very liberating.
So let's back up because I do want to return to some of the stuff that you got a chance to do and that you talked about. But you end up, I think you said, going to Fort Stewart for your first duty assignment, and then you're quickly off to Iraq, right?
Yeah, I roll. I'm supposed to be with 130th Infantry, and ended up getting pulled over to 164 Armor. Flew into Baghdad, and then flew up to Mosul. And we were kind of from Kirkuk up as a footprint, and I was all the way the further west-northwest boundary, Mosul, checkpoint 10. Back then, the game was we knew we were leaving. It was time to make sure, Peshmerga and Iraqi police play nice and lead and can operate without us. We were going from this OIF 7 to Operation Golden Eagle, I can't remember, where it was like we did this big draw demonstration of force and then can't use Bradleys anymore. But we had this primitive experience because Iraq evolved south and north, and we were arriving to bad named maps and locals who thought we were Russian. Like it was as if, we hadn't as Americans gotten that far, right around the dam that was my key terrain. That dam that if it fell, Baghdad would flood. And so it was a very different experience. They had like 40 villages and, awesome platoon sergeant. But very loose, horrible experience at the company and above level. I remember my guiding principles were at my initial counseling were always look cool, always know what you're doing. And if you can't follow rule number 2, fall back to rule number 1.
Yeah, go. It's funny. I held to the same maxim as a lieutenant. I'm like, I may not know what I'm doing, but at least I look good. So if I look the part, I could probably get by on just a couple of, cute little phrases here and there and just, BS my way through it. So I agree 100%. That's the way to do it.
Yeah. But it was a great deployment. I got to see kind of what men do in a tribal format, and it's beautiful. And I really found purpose because of my upbringing. I crossed so many social boundaries just by existing, that I felt it kind of really spiritually aligned to be at that lowest echelon of congressional intent, and right where kind of our heartbeat of our nation, enlisted men and women, where they get shit done and represent their interests. That was kind of that's where Ranger School came to play. I pride myself on bringing home about 88 people and leaving here with 88 people under my purview. And I mean, I could not ask for a more, esteemable aspiration to have growing up, even though I didn't know that really was something to aspire to do. And things like Ranger School teach you in ways you can never, I'd get hey, you got a police call Route Tampa, the route that's too black to drive down, but, we've got a police call it to show Iraqis how to take care of their AO. And I remember being able to have the ingenuity to, hey, all right, I'll walk on the road with these dudes and you guys give me a V on the side and kill anything that looks funny. And, to really trust my NCOs, that's what North Georgia gave me. We come in not scared, but just so malleable to the platoon sergeants. There's so much trust in there that I think it really shapes us to be fifth principal patrolling guys, just common sense oriented.
When you got back, did you have any conversations with your old man about your experience and compare notes with his experience in Vietnam?
I wish I could. I did in my head, man. But he passed right before I went to North Georgia. He died.
Oh, okay.
He had a pretty unhealthy living habits, and they caught up with him. But you're fighting in God's country there. So I definitely did reference him and to myself out there. Never got the privilege, but I was raised by Decatur, and that's very literal. And so once I could find my support networks in the military, we had this grandfather like battalion commander, and keeping it appropriate and above board, I could get what I needed. I can learn so much from everyone else's experience. Kind of one of my skill sets. Empathy,
Gotcha.
I guess.
Wow. Yeah, again, I apologize. We didn't get into that in the notes prior to the episode, so I didn't mean to bring up a sore subject. But, again, I'm always curious about those conversations. And I know this is something we'll get into a little bit down the road, but, we are so much more of a different veteran community now where we do talk about things and we do express those feelings. And, there'll be a time where my kids will ask me about what I did and what I went through. And whereas, if you ever did talk to your dad prior to getting into ROTC about what went on in Vietnam, I'm sure it was a very short, curt conversation because nobody ever talked about it. But
well, we luckily had a very candid. His first approach at me was, "I'm not going to try to be your dad. I fucked that up. I'm just going to try to tell you everything I wish I knew." And he gave me 3 life lessons before he passed. And, you always got to play to win. When I eat, everyone eats, and sometimes you got to let a sleeping dog lie. And I got to see him act that out every day. And I did learn, man, that he was an 88 Mike. This is, from him. And he was really driving in munitions and drugs and then driving out bodies. That was his routine. And it was, he didn't volunteer. He got drafted. And it was a negative experience because right when he got back, there was no diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so when it comes time to cut numbers, there's a way humans kind of use discretion, you know what I mean? That invisibles, and he got a very negative, experience coming back. So I knew to be speculative, I probably came into the military 1 foot in, all the way. And that meant keeping my high school friends and my high school network. That was how I exercised that kind of resentment where, fast forward to now, veteran transition side, it's hard when you see guys come in or come out that really inculcate themselves and cut off all ties. And then when they come out, it's really tough. So I still learn from the small things he did, share with me and the principles he did give me. I've got some great ancestors.
So you finish up in 2010 in Iraq, or 2011, I should say. And then you're in Afghanistan in 2012, about a year later. So that deployment, different kinetically, different overall. I mean, what stands out about it?
It was, for me, it was my second time. I was a little more comfortable. I got to go to a course, JFO school, Joint Fires Observer, where there's not enough resources to make JTACs in the Army. So the JTACs made a course that was like 2 weeks for Army people to be able to talk faster with airplanes, right? And that made me so much more comfortable. And so I was more aware during that whole deployment. We were right outside of Kandahar Airfield. We were the reaction platoon, if you will. There's a lot of chasing, points of origin of ice rockets. And I had a real negative experience with a National Guard entity out there that didn't react how they should, in my opinion, and left their own guys, and we had to take care of it. And so I also had to relieve a platoon sergeant. That was probably the toughest experience. But being more aware doesn't, always make it easier. The more you know, the more you feel like you don't know. At the same time, we were not as kinetic over in Panjway. That's where they were getting off. And we were that splice that supported 2nd Infantry Division. We were just a battalion that had probably a month notice, and we shifted our NTC like 3 months to the left. And, the people who are landing from our California train up are the torch leaving in 24 hours to go to Afghanistan. We were really tired. We just had we landed from NTC, and I remember I'm the arms room officer, and I'm yelling, "Hey, don't move an arms room before I get there." We got the order to move the arms room right before we deploy, So it's like moving a convict or something. And, we set it aside, and once I get back, I have my chalk of 200 guys coming to the arms room, and it's locked. And I call my armor. He's like, "I'm waiting on you." I'm at the new arms room. We're like, shit. We have a hasty ass, like, middle of the night turn in, a mile up, and me and the sergeant major are arguing because I can't get my green 2 and he's a sergeant major and whatever. We start checking at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. Lo and behold, there's a pistol missing. So this is like within that week approaching to Afghanistan, and we go from company lockdown to battalion lockdown to 5 days, or probably 4 days of weirdness, ending with 40 letters of reprimand. And, my eyes were wide open by the time I went to Afghanistan. I was also in a then relationship that was progressing to marriage. And once I say we got in country, it was just no one could ever get their footing. We were perfectly capable, but we trained up gunnery on Bradleys and then found out in the block leave that we're actually going to walk in Afghanistan. So no one could ever really catch up. But coming back, I have more meaningful or more interactive relationships from that deployment that exist now. So the platoon sergeant I ended up getting was a staff sergeant from a mine company, and we're the scout platoon, so we're supposed to have the most seasoned NCO, and I'm kind of angry getting him. Well, he was the project manager for that nonprofit project, and he drove behind me as I walked the AT through the wintertime. And then my long range kind of support guy was my sniper section sergeant from that deployment. That when I had to relieve my platoon sergeant, I remember calling. He's that kind of salt to the earth, wise as hell country boy, and I'm like, hey, can you cover down? I got to relieve platoon sergeant. Hey, sir, you ever ask me that dumb shit again? I'm gonna have to slap. Like just cocky response back, and takes reins as a sniper section sergeant of the biggest platoon in the battalion. And he's now a Apache pilot, test pilot out of Hawaii, and he's playing long range kind of resource for me while I'm going down the Appalachian Trail because he did about 2/3 of it in this time. And so I'd say that deployment set up things. When I came back, I knew I wanted to go to law school because I was there's a period during that deployment where I was disjointed. I knew that the relationship I was in, it wasn't going to be a good marriage if I was active duty because I was just going back to back deployments. And by then, my life goal was to be a present husband and father who served unconditionally and had enough resources to do that, whatever that meant. And so I started aspiring to go to funded legal education program because when I went back to my head, I was like, how did you become an infantry officer? And I don't like getting shot at or shooting people or sleeping in the woods and, past unnecessary amounts, right? And it was because of Colonel Baker. It was like, I want to be like Colonel Baker. And so then I was like, well, who else do you want to be like? Honestly, next names came up, Judge Nash, Dorothy Murphy. Watching that public defender and that judge. And then my brain goes, I like Law and Order, and didn't even think about I can't read, right? That's what Ranger School does for you. Or not can't read, but it's not my favorite hobby, right? But, then I reoriented. I come back, I go to a career course, and I'm looking for a job that allows me to go to Emory Law School because I knew the Army's way for picking flaps. So funded legal education lets you go to law school for free. And it's about $500,000 when you look at it because you keep your term of service going and you come back, you owe the time, but pay for everything. Well, dude at the Pentagon says I'm a shoo-in. Never seen an application like this. Oh my gosh, yes. And I knew I was going to score low on the standardized testing. And so I'm, scheming the system because the system is you apply to the board, they pick you, then you apply to the law schools. I just applied to the law schools and then told the board, hey, don't worry about my 150 LSAT score, really low. Emory said they'll have me and they'll pay some money. And I was like the 28th guy on a 25-man list. They normally have a couple alternates. We had a sequestration or something. It was like one of those like, oh my God, I just butchered my entire infantry career, asking all my fearless leaders, can I go become a JAG? And I went to IBOLIC as a trainer to set up the FLEP transition. And so just literally calling around to say thanks, but no thanks, an opportunity generated where Dean of Admissions at Emory was like, the Army's stupid. Call me back when you figure that out, or, and when you could say more than no, and I called back and one thing led to another and kind of a door opened.
I wanted to spend some time with the integration of the females into the infantry. You serve as a platoon trainer at IBOLIC, right? Infantry BOLIC. Yeah. And, it's always a great opportunity to download all that information that you learned, right? To make the next generation of officers and leaders better than yourselves. But what was, hardest about that job? What did you enjoy the most about that job? Like, because it's a different dynamic than actually being like on a regular active duty unit.
Yeah. I think that was my culminating experience for my military. That's where I can go back and say I knew what I was doing, and I was aligned in my purpose. Because, I didn't necessarily know if we should be in Iraq the whole time I was there. Or, should we go no notice to Afghanistan? I don't know if I was always, drinking all of the Kool-Aid. But at IBOLIC, I could see immediate impact. These 42 souls are going to influence 42 more. On the law of averages, right? And I now know I want to go to law school. So I'm Ranger tabbing anything that looks like it'll help me prepare for law school. So we wanted to stretch the course from 17 weeks to 19 weeks. And instead of being Alpha Bravo Charlie company and you just kind of stay isolated, we chopped the course up over time and said, Alpha, you got week 1 through 5, everybody. And Bravo, week 6 or whatever. So we had just done this huge kind of expansion of course and in real time implementing the shit, landlocking and whatnot. And I'm briefing the 1-star on how in 18 months we'll be integrating women. And that time President Obama's coming across CNN saying effective immediately. And, turns over, I think it's the infantry commandant, and says, Captain Porter, what's your plan? And I was like, I need 5 hours. We're going to range it the fuck up and come pitch it to you. We'll figure it out. And what we learned, one, Ranger community, super professional because they just went through the ringer. And we're all over the news. And it was the day after the SOP in Ranger School says to burn the file, a congressional inquiry started. And all I had was 2 sheets of paper, right? And that's what the SOP said since 1962 because, General Petraeus's peer comments aren't relevant past graduation, so they just have a 2-sheeter, and that became a problem. So we got to learn intimate knowledge of what they did, what they wish they could do, because the military makes you do AARs by the numbers, especially if you're going to be a congressional inquiry. So we luckily were able to pull off a POI switch at the same time as, having a course that was standard focused. Best part, I still get calls to this day, and I'm still mentoring and coaching and being influenced by people I once influenced. And worst part, I got to see ugly. When you're apolitical by choice, so I didn't vote till I got out of uniform. That was just because I felt conflicted. But you heard some nasty things when Bush was in office and some nasty things when Obama was in office, and infantry kind of shoots it straight, right? Well, when we got the subject of gender, there's some ugly ways, deep down in the core, some people felt. And it was easy to say, hey, it's an executive order, we're doing it. But to try to build that common ground to get the decision implemented in a proper way, we started asking, it took way too late for us, but we started asking the female population, right? And once they bought in, or not bought in, but once they started influencing it, it was hey, issue being, where are you going to put the slit trench in the patrol base? The input we overwhelmingly would get would just be, just don't make it weird. Why does it got to be weird? How about let's just go through the course and we'll speak up or something and it really got us to focus on the fact that, hey, we were letting through some National Guardsmen that weren't passing the 5 miles on the pencil whip later from the '05 and above from Montana, saying he ran 5 miles within 2 weeks of leaving us, under 40 minutes. And if we were going to let the standard flip there, how about we just fix the standard? And whoever meets that standard can be an infantry branch, whatever. And once we just focused on that, saying 100% of people who will cross this line are going to be vetted by everyone in the formation, you had institutional buy-in. And it never made the news, which is the success. Like, it's just, we got what we have now. But I mean, that was formidable for me. And I had women as my superheroes. I left home at 14. I had the playbook from my sister. She left home at 14, 10 years before me. She didn't get the good end of it though. She trusted the wrong person, right? And it, we have, if we're watching, we have the answers, in our community for stuff. And I can draw that line from there all the way to, my, I guess, immediate acceptance of, yeah, this is totally going to work. Because I've seen a aviator come over the hill that's male and female in an intense situation, and communication flawless on one side of that equation, not on the other. And it looks like all my boys took pre-workout, because once that tone of voice came over that radio, just then became vital there's too many goods, especially when you have women who can outperform us physically, in totally different ways now, in performance. What do you do when a guy couldn't carry, his rucksack, or you just cross-load it, right? So it just, we kind of got over ourselves, and we just got over task condition standards. So we were in the reverberation of going to that adult learning model where it's okay to ask why now, and everybody, we've already established, can be a sensor. And I had phenomenal leadership. Oh my God, Matt Weber. And this, it's just so formidable. I mean, now to see what happens in a community when money's not on the table, but people feel like their values are at odds, and how we can literally get through this if we all just pay attention and, don't take things personally and don't make assumptions. And the military, man, being in corporate America now, I look at the problem set of corporate DE&I, and I say, hey, gender is usually good and race is good. I don't feel weird for being the minority racially at Big Law, but I do feel really uncomfortable being the vet. And I think that's going on right now, and everyone's starting to notice that the next diverse thing, if we say humanity is the most diverse human is an American, and the next diverse American is a veteran. That's it. It just captures us. And so everybody loves a vet. We're seeing things getting trendy. But it's, I think, how we're going to cut through a lot of noise. That common ground. If you're not willing to fight for it, shut up. And that community who could talk to gun regulation. Well, vets kill themselves at a high rate, and they do it with guns at a high rate. That sounds like a community. And now, bam, you got everybody included, gender and race or whatever we categorize ourselves by.
All right, so you leave active duty, and you end up going to law school. You stay in the Guard a little bit. On the personal side, you talked about wanting to be a present husband and father. Does that happen somewhere in between?
Tried hard, man. It did. It went on for about 7 years. It was great. We just, weren't the best team. And I really have to credit, the decision-making process that I borrowed in Afghanistan. So when I wanted to go find out what I wanted to do, I tried to, it's going to sound Simon Sinek-y, but I started with why, and then went to how, and then went to what, just like we would plan a mission, right? And my why was present husband and father. So when we didn't have kids, father wasn't, being fulfilled, but I was doing the preliminary work to do it. And, when not a husband, well, I just fell back to being present, right? And that's hard enough. So my personal kind of archetype, I'm still on that mission, right? And I think it's whatever, everyone has their own mission, but once you determine why you're there, it's a lot easier to determine how to move and operate about that why.
I know we talked earlier about being in commercial real estate and that sort of law and everything else. I mean, well, that's, it's not necessarily germane to what we talk about here on the podcast, but
Right.
Is that a field like you feel like you're going to stay in? Do you like it? Do you enjoy it?
Yeah, it is tough. I didn't know many lawyers. The first lawyer I remember paying attention to in my adult life was the FLEP, who was, the last input before boss dropped bombs, you know what I mean? And saying we got probable cause or whatever. I could reach back to the child experiences, but I definitely didn't know many lawyers, and then I didn't really know any corporate lawyers. And so, there's a lot of learning of just some of the norms and whatnot. It's big organization, but it's not anything like a big organization that I've been to. Do like real estate. So I grew up in Decatur, and I got to watch, if you go to the city of Decatur now versus, when I was born, it's just hand over fist, a more add value kind of place to a lot of people's lifestyle. But I got the experience of like the candy lady lost her house that she's owned for generations because she couldn't afford the taxes, and all the taxes went to the school system and all the kids were out of the school. So I've had this empathy of wanting to touch real estate, influence it. So in law school, I worked doing like part-time title insurance, and I liked how tangible it was. So I could see, helping people get to a common goal and it being tangible, working with my kind of style, because I didn't want to fight anymore. I just spent all this time fighting, and so I'm definitely. I don't think I'm comfortable at the corporate law level. I'll be probably moving out and finding like a smaller outfit. But I think getting a law degree has way less to do with like using it as the practice of law than it does some of the skill set development you get. Like I can go learn now anything, or I have an idea of how to start a nonprofit project and eventually start a nonprofit, or put together, an agreement so everyone feels comfortable. So I'm excited to see how I can use that on my toolkit. Not necessarily going to probably be that, categorical lawyer, but it's very akin to being a military officer, but it's not at the same time.
Sure, that makes sense. When do you start to recognize and start to get involved with veteran suicide and prevention and everything else? I mean, how does this whole thing come about? Before we get to, and I don't know if it happens simultaneously with establishing something out of nothing, or are they separate? So kind of break that down. Yeah.
I'd say they're separate. So first part, where did I get introduced? I think my child, hurt people, and people not dealing with mental health kind of sometimes gets projected on others and turns into suffering. So I think I've touched mental health long part, and I've had kind of blinders off for a long time, a lot longer than some of my peers. And so I think that Judge Nash, gentleman, superhero, eventually takes his life. And he would be a juvenile justice by day and then fly to the middle of Africa and be a humanitarian by night. And I carried that rock in my rucksack for a very long time. When I got #1 in the nation, I became very close with a gentleman who eventually retired shortly after finishing there, and he took his life. And then we started talking about veteran mental health because 22 a day we got established, I think, in 2012, 2013. And so, like, I'd see the push-ups. I do mine silently, and I'm not in the picture kind of person. But I didn't really ever feel like I got to swing that bat in a way, or had the time or bandwidth or whatnot. And boy, just the amount of people I've known intimately that have taken their life by just service alone, it's ridiculous. Everything from just being the inspector, on the investigation when student commits suicide to your friends, your loved ones. The mortar sergeant just took his life last May. And so watching, being at, corporate law, up on a high floor, still afraid of heights, like, as an airborne ranger. But, going through imposter syndrome, watching the news and just feeling like, whoa, what is going on here? Everything kind of coalesced. And I was going through my own hardship. And as we kind of were talking about, I've had, hardships. So every time you go through one, you need to make sure the dominoes are not going to collapse. It's not always that one domino you're going through. And so I had an aspiration to hike the trail, kind of seeded into me from a friend who always talked about it. And one thing led to another. And I had this like really emotional experience on an 8-mile run with a vet named Buck from Vietnam era days. And he was moving this log out of the street. And I was like mile 7 of an 8-mile run that didn't even mean to run. And I hadn't been running. I just needed to burn energy. Was getting back into good habits. And man, come to find out, he lost his son 3 days prior to suicide. And we had this moment in the street because on that run, I had thought about hiking 2,200 miles and doing 22 push-ups, in honor. That would be my kind of way to pay homage. And in our conversation, he mistook me to say I was thinking about committing suicide. So he gave me this like fatherly response that was still raw because he just lost his son. And once I cued, recommunicated, hey, no, I'm saying I'm thinking of this is so nice that we've met. I'm thinking of walking 2,200 miles to raise awareness and resources for veterans so they don't get to the point of committing suicide. We just had, metal to metal left in a different direction kind of experience. Both crying, and I went to run back to where I was finishing and ran like I hadn't been running 7 miles, man. I felt that charge, and I took that to a community leader and around here, Jay Bailey. If you haven't heard about him, he's making magic with the Russell Innovation Center of Entrepreneurship, and he's really into business. And I kind of just took it by him for a smell test, and he gave me the conviction. If not you, then who would do this? And if not now, then when? We need something. And he thought enough of that. If I could just, for me, we could just influence one vet, which, it's a negative thing. You can't prove it. We can influence one vet to make the right choice. It would have been worth it. And asking my friends for help was my way to like platoon lead another chapter. Because we had literally my friends taking pictures of too many people in the back of their planes, and they're making human choices, risking their careers, risking their lives. No thanks. And the rest of us are sitting back thinking, what was the last 20 years? And being in corporate law, we can get lonely for other reasons, but that can make the hall silent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we saw 9/11 coming, and said that, man, 20th anniversary, that's a hell of a day to start. So we started on Katahdin up in Maine then. And by then we had been... So
just so everybody's clear, you hiked the entire Appalachian Trail beginning in Maine on September 11, 2021, and you didn't finish until February 22nd, 2022?
We actually finished January 25th. I skipped the Smokies because we had Winter Storm Izzy. But we were kind of ahead of schedule anyway. But we didn't want to finish anything after February 22nd because in our head that was 2/22/22. I was like, no later than then we had to finish. So we went back in June and finished the Smokies. So now we've technically done the whole thing, but yeah, we did like all but 50 or 60 miles between that time frame, and it took a village. And we'd have vets fly out, walk with us. Pennsylvania National Guard came to join up with us. We'd stay at some American Legions and meet up with some VFW contacts, and Susan met us at the Library of Congress. We did the interviews. North Georgia, being what it is at the bottom, came and walked me in the last 2 miles, a bunch of their cadets. It was a very beautiful thing, man. And we were a project, the Toughest Kids initiative. So Toughest Kids is his purpose for special needs children that are wards of the state and Gold Star families. And what we kind of my mentor was how I became in contact with them. And sorry, it's tough. So since then, my conduit to Toughest Skins Initiative has passed. It's a husband and wife team, Kelly and Charlie Shell. It's a North Georgia alum who is an aviator. Him and his wife was the chairperson of the board, just passed in July, and they kind of hold up Lake Hartwell, that whole community. He served valiantly as a civilian in the investment advisor industry, and then in the nonprofit space. Their family just gave so much. And so I fit some of those categories as an individual.
Sure.
And what we were doing was in homage of White Star families. And what we were pointing out was that's not included in Gold Star families. White Stars are those losing veterans to suicide. It's sickening that I didn't know that until I started doing my research to go on this venture. But like, they were compelled, as well as the board, that entire nonprofit, and allowed us to operate. Because flash to bang, to do something nonprofit, man, it takes a year or something. And we were able to, basically work within their infrastructure and serve immediately. And so, yeah, sorry, it's tough. Every time I talk about the project, I'm talking about them as well. I just need to pay homage. Yeah.
And so Something Outta Nothing comes from all of this?
Yeah, Something Outta Nothing is a project that is, we took initial donations, got equipment, prepared, and started hiking. We're able to enable some different veteran communities. And now we're doing speaking engagements, working with kind of Cobb County veterans, whoever have time and we can support. We're kind of, I like framing it as combat enabling. And in this period, applying for nonprofit status so we can go and do future things. I hope to somehow nest all of this real estate with veteran service and the leadership we all naturally have coming from that community one day, and just serve it for veteran support. We were able to kind of triangulate veteran mental health it's actually a way described by Greg Washington, who's a gentleman who also walked 1,800 miles. He walked from Mountain Bayou, Louisiana to West Point, finished on September 11th. So me and him high-fived September 10th in New York, right outside West Point, as I was going to Maine. And he played a very strong input for me on, someone who's done something half crazy like this. And definitely someone to interview. If you haven't yet, I haven't looked diligently.
Listen, love to put them on. Certainly worthwhile. What is the message that you tell veterans now about veteran suicide and everything else? And I mean, are you coming across people who are reaching out to you as sort of a resource? I mean, where is the whole project and how is it all coming together?
Absolutely. I'm getting reached out to the point where I'm seeking my own coaching to get coached up. Hopefully working with programs like mental health first aid or listen, learn, lead. And so I can get certified to help more because, I don't care to lead blind. I have a lot of experience in this world and empathy, but that don't make it structure. But we know who to put people in touch with. It's kind of the role we're playing now while I figure out what to do individually and what the next moves. We want to do the next grant writing process with more specific intent than my movement to contact. Hiking Appalachian Trail to emulate veteran transition. But hopefully we'll have something come out in documentary form to kind of tell this behind the scenes story, because you just had literal this MacGyver thinking going on from a guy. My number two is a Jason Pomeroy helping get Afghanistan interpreters one week and then jumping on my project the next. But when I talk your other part of your question, talking to veterans, taken from Greg Washington, looking at veteran mental health as a triangle, like that old patrol base, one apex, we just like to think of it as isolation. And the other apex, financial stress, and the third apex, toxic relationships. And a human being at 100%, however you culminate that apex, you know, if it's 33, 33, 33, it's going to break. We're fragile. That's just what it is. Veterans are a minority to the majority of non-veterans that have, you know, a starting point above 0%. You know, on that, either they isolate, and it's physical isolation, it's mental isolation more often than not. And the financial stress and toxic relationships, you know, they're hard to identify if someone's isolated. And so our project was literally trying to be a flag going south, lightning rod, to help someone connect through the wintertime when we know numbers matriculate. And our goal was to raise up a bunch of money, hand out the, you know, 22 veteran entities. That was our kind of penultimate goal. Didn't get there. We raised like 50 grand, half of it was mine. And but we saved a life. And we learned that about 6 weeks later. And it was like everyone just got this new conviction. We learned that someone was interviewing me, took the advice, applied it, lives to tell the story. And then we also helped another veteran meaningfully transition from active duty to a job in the human development at a university doing veteran mental health type stuff. And so, like, we got a mission accomplished. We had so many influenceable moments on ourselves and on other communities. We were trying to breach isolation. And by breaching isolation, we'll be able to identify financial stress, toxic relationships, or help people self-identify, get them in the right direction. Highlight things like 188 number is changing to now 988. I think it was July 16th. Simple things. And then, like, having the audacity to say that's the first time we got an American entitlement in the mental health community, a 3-digit emergency hotline. You know, that's what makes you American when you go overseas and you're like, what am I missing most? You know, it's like the ability to have immediate support anywhere in the country. And now veterans only, or anyone in mental health, specifically veterans, I think it's like 988, press 1 for the Veteran Crisis Hotline. But just being a sounding board for information in real time, and learning from people like Garrett Cathcart. I saw he was on your one of your shows, and, you know, learning what they're doing and applying it in real time, in our own way. And, you know, just it's beautiful once we go all in, and it gives me some of that purpose I'm lacking in other roles.
And again, I think that the key part of this is you talk so much about the connectivity, right? And how the connective tissue reaches farther than you think it does sometimes. And that's the ability, I think, to save a life, that it's, you know, you put all these little pieces together and they add up to something that's fairly momentous. And from that standpoint, you know, the idea of what you're doing and what you have done to combat it along the way is you've picked up onesies and twosies along the way in the veteran community who are all going to advocate with you alongside you. And I think that makes it a pretty powerful thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, I'm in Georgia where, you know, one thing I learned in the infantry is there's cousins socioeconomically, and the rural poor and the urban poor. They're cousins, right? And there's a whole community in Georgia, like 150 something of our counties are under-resourced when it comes to mental health, period. Full stop. And it's not Fulton and DeKalb, I don't think, you know what I mean? And that's a lot of my brethren that are out there, agriculture world. There's just so much help needed everywhere. And I think it cuts by second and third order effect through some other, like, its consequences are positive. You get one more active apolitical member to society that can help be a bridge builder to whatever disagreements, you know?
All right. Well, where can they get in touch with Something Outta Nothing, or Toughest Kids or whatever, to continue to provide support?
So Something Outta Nothing, if you go to son.vet, son.vet, got to do a website update, obviously. But on Facebook, also at TKISSON, or Instagram, TKISSON_22. We hope to have some type of YouTube feature later on, but, you know, it's tough. It's tough starting off, you know, as full-time professionals, but You know, where there's a will, there's a way.
What was the best view on the trail that you hiked that you stopped and was like, wow? Because I'm looking at some of the pictures. They look pretty awe-inspiring, to say the least.
Yeah, Mahoosuc's Notch was pretty cool. Really seeing the leaf change in the Presidential Mountain Range was just ridiculous. It was right when it just looks like watercolors, green, you know, all the earth tones. Man, you know, once you got the not phase, but once you got the winter time, you could start to see far. And it was just always feeling like coming home. So seeing some more familiar spots were good. But I think I had most memorable moment was sitting in a cabin in a hodgepodge of, or a hostel, I guess it was, in the presidentials. Everybody's got it. You can only stay in certain places. And this family of like 20, 25 people, and none of them were vets, but it was a mixed group of like professionals that have been traveling so long, it's kind of like family. And some from Europe and some from here. And it was just so beautiful to have some, you know, homemade wine and food and break bread and serve as kind of representative in this capacity. And then just meeting just ridiculous veterans coming down the trail, just stories and learning everyone's stories. It was such a good time.
Yeah, I mean, look, the pictures look amazing. It's awesome to see all the North Georgia cadets meet you at the top of the mountain there for your final stretch here at the bottom of the Appalachian Trail. And look, man, I think it's amazing what you have done and how you've been able to pivot from point to point in your life and really make some critical decisions that have set you on a path now that have not many would have predicted. You know, if you're doing connect the dots, they don't all go in a nice, neat order like some people have them doing. Your dots kind of go all over the place, and I think that's pretty awesome.
I think asking for help, man. Asking for help is kind of the way to do that. And you know, when being appreciative for what you have. You know, there's a person in the children's home that first impression of suicide was a roommate of mine. Dad was on the way to pick him up, and instead, walked across highway, killed himself. And that was my first like impression. Listen at your worst points and take it forward, and you'll always realize, man, like you could get worse. It could get worse. You know what I mean? And that gratitude you gain from your current circumstance, you just share it. Someone else will pull you through the breach. That's what the military got me. There's just always such a network to help, as long as you're willing to square up with whatever it is and be vulnerable. Be honest with yourself.
Well, vulnerability seems to be like a strong suit for you as you have detailed this story, and I certainly appreciate it. I mean, I thank you for, you know, the time and obviously letting people know where they can get a hold of you and continue to help push towards their success in combating veteran suicide and everything else. But, you know, obviously the law stuff will take care of itself. I don't have any concerns with you in that manner. You know, I know there's still more greatness to achieve there, but I am genuinely thankful that there are people like you out there continuing to spread the word about veteran suicide, because I don't think anybody else is equipped to handle that problem better than we are.
Yeah, I don't either. And you know, where could we be with 22 more apolitical vets a day since 2013? And you know, I know retention numbers are weird right now, but you know, keep doing like no bullshit. Alex Mack, listening there, I go back to, you know, oh, I can fly. What says I can't? You know, 10-year service obligation kind of stops, but it makes me reassess. Like, I only got 10 more years. What about JAG or something? You know, and just helping each other, I think, is the moral of the story. And by default, those that care for veterans get in the fight. You know what I mean? Get in the fight and just ask and connect.
And that's the difficult part. Understanding that just because the uniform comes off, the fight doesn't stop. There's still an inherent responsibility to take care of each other. There's still an inherent responsibility to leave nobody behind, and there's still an inherent responsibility to lead from the front and all those things. And I don't think any of us should be looking to abdicate any of that just because we officially took off the uniform.
Mm-hmm. And as long as there's the headstrongs out there and all these different, I mean, just great ideas getting implemented and getting backed, I see a brighter day. You know, it always gets
Fingers
tougher
crossed.
sometimes before it gets better. But like, hey, we got 46,000 veteran nonprofits out there. And like, that was my conviction to that, you know, let me pick 22 that makes sense. And someone else's conviction might change the world. That's the goal. It's not going to be us. It's going to be the person you inspire most likely.
Well, again, thank you for your time and sharing your story. Best of luck and continued success with everything. And certainly, I hope that this story reaches many people and your story reaches many people, because it's one worth hearing. And with that said, Earl Porter, thanks for being part of the Hazard Ground.
Appreciate you guys. Godspeed.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, hosted by Mark Zinno. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at producer@hazardground.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.